Hello, folks. How you doing? Good afternoon. Today is the fifth day of March, 2024. It is, what time is it? 1:30 in the afternoon down here in Tampa, Florida. Slightly overcast. What does this say? It is mostly cloudy and 80 degrees. I know some of you guys are in winter states right now, and you're shivering, and you got some sludge or some snow, and you're slipping and sliding. It's 80 degrees down here in Tampa. And we're supposed to be all happy and joyful and living in Florida, living in paradise. Yeah, right. But here we are. What's today's news? The big news for today is I'm going to leave Gaza aside for a day, and we're going to talk about the Supreme Court. What do we have going on here? Let me fix this, because I'm going to use this later. There we go. See if I can even those ring lights out a bit. There we go. We'll talk about the election. We'll talk about Donald Trump. We'll talk about the U.S. Supreme Court. We're going to talk about the ruling yesterday. We're going to talk about the reaction from the, I guess the only way you can describe the late night comedian scene, late night news scene these days is influencers, I guess, is the only thing that you can actually describe them as, because they damn sure don't do any research, and they damn sure don't tell you the truth. And they damn sure aren't neutral when it comes to reporting the fucking news. Now, many of you guys know I have been a lifelong lefty. Did not vote for Barack Obama because I knew who Barack Obama was while he was running for office. A little research will tell you that. In spite of the fact that how much I hated George Bush and Dick Cheney and the neocons and what they did to this country and other countries, I still couldn't, feel the change hype. And I made fun of people who did. I'm well documented for that. And I haven't voted in the presidential election since 2000, when I saw Al Gore bringing down the gavel on the Black Caucus, who needed one senator's signature to stop the process and to continue the count in Florida and to address the 56,000 people, mostly black, in Florida, who were disenfranchised from their right to vote illegally by, what was her name? Harris? What was her fucking name? The attorney general back then who ran the election and was actually on fucking the election campaign of fucking George Bush. When I saw Al Gore playing along with it in 2000, I realized that it was all just a show. It was just a scam. It was just they're all on the same fucking team, so to speak. I try to call them like I see them. And in the case of the Colorado Supreme Court voting 5-4, by the way, important numbers here, voting 5-4 to uphold Colorado kicking Donald Trump off the fucking ballot, the general election ballot, saying he was disqualified. When I saw that on the 19th of December, 2023, on the 20th of December, 2023, I made a video and I wrote an article, which is something I don't do that much anymore. I used to write a lot. But now I don't, because my eyes are bad and because taking these fucking reading glasses on and off and off and on while trying to fuck it. So I don't write as much as I used to. I hardly write at all anymore. But I remembered writing what I wrote on December 20th, 2023. And the takeaway from that is not that I wrote that the Supreme Court is likely going to overturn the Colorado Supreme Court's decision. The takeaway from that was why Colorado did what they did and why the U.S. Supreme Court was probably going to do what they ended up doing. That is something that nobody is addressing and nobody is talking about, and yet it is the most important aspect to this whole fucking thing. And nobody remembers it. The Colorado Supreme Court did not rule 5-4 close that Donald Trump should be taken off of the fucking ballot, the general election ballot for November, because he instigated an insurrection and sent people into the fucking halls of the hallowed halls of Congress to overthrow democracy. In fact, the Colorado Supreme Court stated in their ruling, if anybody bothered to fucking read it, like Stephen Colbert or Jon Stewart or any of the other jackasses who were talking about this last night, if any of them bothered to read the Colorado Supreme Court ruling, what they said was there's little to no evidence that Donald Trump did any of that. The reason that they did it was because Donald Trump had called into question the glorious electronic voting machines, and that could not be allowed. They stated that by calling into question the validity of the election results, he set in motion a tidal wave of the insurgency that ended up, of course, with the help of the feds, going through fucking the Capitol buildings and doing what they fucking did. The insurgency of 1/6, what I refer to as the Velvet Rope Revolution. It wasn't that he instigated an insurgency and sent his troops into fucking the Capitol to steal back the election. That's not what happened, and that's not what the Colorado Supreme Court said. What they said was he challenged publicly the validity of the electronic voting machine results. Just like so many other countries have in the past. Mouse number 2. Many have in the past. Okay, you're not going to be able to read that. Well, that's going to be difficult to read. Okay. I was getting ready to bring the fucking laptop closer to the camera. Yeah, I'm an idiot. I don't think that's going to help at all, is it? Yeah, I guess you can rate it here. I'm going to be out of focus for a few seconds, but that's all right. We can live with that because this is what's more important. This is a list, according to Wikipedia, current list of some nations that do and don't use electronic voting machines. Summary table, summary of status of electronic voting in parliamentary elections by countries. Even though we don't have a parliamentary system, our thing is listed here because it's a yes. This is a very small list. In fact, the vast majority of countries do not use electronic voting machines. You don't take my word for it, take Quora's word for it. They'll tell you. They list 3 that actually do. India, Brazil, and Estonia. Yeah, we can be just like India, Brazil, and Estonia if you like. But they tell you right there. There's a reason for that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. And I'll tell you right here on Wikipedia, the CIA's controlled Wikipedia. They only list a few nations. There are 200, just over 200 nations in the world, and they list maybe 40. The rest are a definitive no. They do not use them. But the largest, the majority on this list, for some reason that they picked these, they're also, the majority is no, they don't use them. Let me read to you a couple of them that, let me just show you real quick. Argentina, no. Australia, no. For blind, low vision and blind people, they did use some for the federal election in 2007, but that's it. Bangladesh, no. Belgium, yes. Brazil, yes. Bulgaria, that staple of fucking democracy in Bulgaria, yes. Burkina Faso, no. Canada, no. Democratic Republic of Congo, yes. Estonia, yes. Finland, no. Finland tried it in 2008. If you can't read this, I'll read it for you. Trial 2008. Review in 2016 through 17 concluded against internet voting risks outweighed benefits. Risks of what? What do you think? France, no. 2017 review concluded against introducing internet voting. Citizens abroad vote by internet in legislative and consular elections, but not for president or EU. Germany, no. They tried it in 2005, but found it was unconstitutional in 2009. Ghana, no. India, yes. Ireland, no. They scrapped this system in 2010. Why? Because they figured it was too easy to fucking rig elections. So they got rid of it in 2010. Do you see where we're going with this? Japan, no. Is Japan and Germany and France, are they allies of the United States? Are they countries that we like to look at and say, okay, they're similar in terms of our election process, in terms of our threshold for democracy? Are they? Yes, they are, aren't they? They don't use them, by the way. Lithuania, no. Malaysia, no. Mozambique, no. Namibia, no. Netherlands, no. Norway, no. Pakistan, no. Philippines, yes. But currently in review by Congress due to technical glitches, wink, wink, wink. Defective vote counting machines. Defective vote counting machines. So the Philippines, yes, but they're about to fucking remove them. Romania, no. South Korea, I don't think so. For central counting of ballot papers only, so South Korea is also a no. Spain, no. Sweden, no. Switzerland, no. Only internet voting, only electronic voting in Switzerland is by expats living outside the country by the internet. United Arab Emirates, yes. United Kingdom, no. United States, yes. Venezuela, yes. They brought it back about in Venezuela back in the day with Venezuela. And even Zimbabwe, no. This is a very short list. The rest aren't even worthy of putting on the list because they are just a flat out no, don't try it, get it away from us. Israel, our glorious friends in Israel. No. You see any notification of an election taking place in Israel, you'll see fucking Bibi Netanyahu putting a piece of paper in a fucking box. That, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, is why we are unique in the world in terms of our fucking use of electronic voting machines. There's very good reason, with or without the statements of Donald Trump and fucking assholes like his buddy with the fucking Nixon tattoo on his back. There's very good reason to question the use of electronic voting machines. Very good reason. And all Trump did, I'm going to read you my article down below so you can tell I'm not making this shit up. I told you then, in all likelihood, the Supreme Court is not going to uphold this. I told you then that. And I'm going to read this for you. But I'm also going to read for you a quote from the the Colorado Supreme Court decision, where it makes it clear that it's not about insurrection of 1-6. It's about the fact that he questioned the actual fucking results of our electronic voting machine elections, which, by the way, as I state in the article, big business has a fucking democracy trick. And their trick is they control who gets put in place with electronic voting machines, black box voting, faith-based voting. You can't look at the fucking, you can't read the day of the election. You can't go and then say, I'm going to take the memory card out of this box right here. We're going to shut this box down right here. I'm going to take the memory card out, and I'm going to do an evaluation of the software on this card that dictates to this box how it counts these votes. Can't do that. Why? It's proprietary software. It's a business. The rights of the business that have the contract to count your votes are more fucking important than your right as a citizen of this democracy. I'm sorry, I'm still sick. I'm doing the best I can. And that, boys and girls and ladies and gentlemen, is a goddamn fact. So all these people, on the left especially, some on the right, you go back and look. I'll show you a quote from the Cato Institution. Libertarians. They also couldn't abide by Donald Trump questioning the great fucking electronic voting machines. In spite of the fact that I just showed you how many fucking nations across the world do just that. How many nations across the world who are, by the way, our allies and countries that we emulate and think of ourselves as at least on par with him in terms of our democracy. Whether we are a free and open democratic fucking nation. They don't use electronic voting machines. That's why people are sued out of existence when anybody dares to fucking bring this shit up. That's why people like Trump are essentially removed from office. I'll read this article to you, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. I told you to keep in mind the numbers a few seconds ago. It was a 5-4 decision in Colorado. It was in the U.S. Supreme Court, it was a 9-0. A 9-0, or I should say 0-9, so you understand the math in a second. Which means, of all those justices, okay, 18 justices. 18, is that right? 5-4 is 9, it's 18. Of 18 justices, 5 thought that Trump shouldn't be allowed to run, and 13 thought that he should be. Interestingly enough, there are 3 left-leaning fucking lefty fucking justices in the U.S. Supreme Court, and there are 9 in the Colorado Supreme Court. Which means it's not a down the fucking line partisan bi-party fucking vote. By any stretch of the imagination. It's not even close. And even the fucking late night pundits, the fucking influencers, the liars, the people who get paid a lot of money to come up with comedic and funny ways, nifty, yuck ways to lie to people in order to influence them. Even they'll tell you, oh yeah, it's not even close in terms of that fucking vote. Stephen Colbert goes, yeah, this is the U.S. Supreme Court is the only place in the country where Donald Trump can win the general election, the popular vote, which is a direct reference to the 3 million extra votes that just popped up out of nowhere after Hillary Clinton in 2016 lost the blue states, the blue wall states, which cost her the election. And so out of nowhere, in California, they just kept popping up all these votes. Why? Because at first, when they wanted to overturn the results of those elections, they were trying to say, let's just dump the fucking electoral college system and go with the popular vote, because they were just manufacturing them in fucking California. These are votes that popped up after the election. Oh, we got more votes. These are days and days and days after the election. After Hillary conceded, because she lost the blue wall states. I remember, I watched the whole goddamn thing live. And then out of nowhere, California, blue state, just started popping up all these votes. She got 3 million extra votes. Out of nowhere. She couldn't, when she was campaigning against Bernie Sanders in California, Bernie Sanders was filling stadiums. Hillary Clinton couldn't fill a high school lunchroom. And that's a goddamn fact. And yet, out of the blue, after California had already conceded, they had 96% of the vote in. Boom, 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 boom. Here's an additional 3 million for you. That's Stephen Colbert. That, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, is why so many nations don't use electronic voting machines. I'm going to read this for you, and that's going to be my video for today. Here's the Trump ruling. This is from December 19th, 2023. Trump is disqualified from holding office, Colorado Supreme Court rules. The ruling, which said that former President Donald Trump engaged in insurrection, that's not what it said, applied only to Colorado. His campaign said it planned to appeal the U.S. Supreme Court, and they did. The Colorado Supreme Court is the first to find out that Trump should be disqualified from the ballot. Right. That's Maggie Astor. Is she from the New York Astor clan? I guess she probably is if she writes for the New York Times. This is what I wrote the very next day. Trump disqualified by Colorado Supreme Court for committing the unforgivable sin. I'm going to read this whole thing to you, just to let you know that at one point in time, I could, in fact, write. I'm also going to make sure that you understand that no matter what point I come from. Now, let me just make this clear. I've heard fucking jackasses out there talking about me being a Marxist or this or that and the other thing. Let me explain something to you. I am a capitalist. I'm a capitalist in the vein of the capitalists from the 1934 to 1979. What does that mean, Scott? That means I am a regulated market economy capitalist. And why do I say that? Why? I'm on the left. I thought all the lefties were Marxist. Fuck you. No, I'm on the left, and I am a capitalist. I believe in a regulated market economy. Now, what does that mean? Well, I guess that means nowadays when it's free market or you're a commie, I'm a commie. But I'm not. By the same token, neither is, China or Russia or Venezuela, for that matter. They're not commie. They're regulated market economies, which means big business doesn't fucking dictate the way the country should be run. They keep big business in check when they need to. That's what made the first fucking middle class the world had ever known in these here United States of America. Did you know that? You should. They didn't just hand the shit over to big business and say, do what the fuck you want. There was an example of that attempted in a place called Germany. Didn't work out so well for them. or the German people, for that matter. They were called fascists. Now, so I am not a Marxist. I'm kind of a socialist, but not really what you call a socialist. I am a capitalist. By the same token, I'm also not a free marketeerist. I'm not a libertarian. I know it's all fucking the in vogue thing to say, but I'm going to, or to be these days, but I'm going to read you what the Cato Institute, if you don't know what the Cato Institute is, then you should take a look and see for yourself. But I'm going to read you what they thought about Donald Trump's fucking opinion on electronic voting machines. In spite of the fact that it was apparently the vast majority of the rest of the countries in the world share his opinion. Trump disqualified by Colorado Supreme Court for committing the unforgivable sin. In a remarkable turn of events, the Colorado Supreme Court has declared in a 200-page ruling that former President Donald Trump is disqualified from running for office under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America. Quote, the ruling, which said that former President Donald Trump engaged in insurrection, applies only to Colorado. His campaign said it planned to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, New York Times. The Colorado Supreme Court is made up entirely of Democrat-appointed justices, as this act reeks of political hackery. I told you, look at the numbers, 5-4, and yet they were all Democrats. The Colorado Supreme Court's 7-member bench was entirely appointed by Democratic governors, 6 of whom won retention elections, and a 7th will run to do so next year. So it's 7 members, not 6. Not 8, not 9. However, we'll take a closer look at this development. If we take a closer look at this development, we might find the fingerprints of all sorts of perps involved. Section 3, disqualification for holding office. No person shall be a senator or a representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or any other state, who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature or as an executive or a judicial officer of any state to support the Constitution given of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. That's the important thing. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. Despite their best efforts, no one was ever able to prove Donald Trump directed anyone to enter the hardy, hallowed halls of Congress on January 6, 2021, either on that day or at any other time during the lead up to it. Therefore, this is not about him having engaged in any insurrection or rebellion against the United States. Reuters. The FBI has found scant evidence that the January 6 attack on the U.S. Capitol was the result of an organized plot to overturn presidential election results, according to 4 current and former law enforcement officials. Instead, what I highlighted is the issue or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. Did Trump give aid or comfort to his supporters? Is there a way to quantify such a claim? But again, that is not the sticking point here. What is really disturbing is the suggestion that Trump supporters who were calling for putting on a hold the ratification of the 2020 elections are to be considered enemies thereof. How is that any different than what Hillary Clinton supporters did, including herself and her staff members in 2016, or what Al Gore supporters did in 2000? Remember when they tried to get the Electoral College voters to switch sides and vote for Hillary instead of Trump? That's a fact. That happened. Clinton and her minions then went so far as to assert Vladimir Putin helped Trump to steal the election in 2016, which would make the United States government a puppet regime of Russia. Questioning the results of a rigged election is not an insurrection. And for that matter, neither is a bunch of hyped-up fanboys being baited into a congressional building by Fed so they can do what's happening right now, i.e. keep Trump from running for office again. But the devil is in the details, if you pay close enough attention. This is from The Hill. The Colorado Supreme Court issued a ruling Tuesday night arguing Trump should be prevented from appearing in the state's Republican primary ballot because of his alleged role in the January 6, 2021 Capitol attack. In a 4-3 ruling, the court ruled Trump was involved in an insurrection by promoting false claims of election fraud and directing his supporters to the Capitol, where some participated in the riots to stop certification of 2020 election results. That's the Hill. In a 4-3 ruling, the court ruled Trump was involved in an insurrection by promoting false claims of election fraud. Meanwhile, folks like Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart lying through their teeth last night, talking about the fact that Donald Trump was leading a fucking insurrection against democracy itself on January 6, 2021. On Monday, the Supreme Court unanimously ruled the former President Donald Trump can appear on all 2024 election ballots. Stephen Colbert said the justices are once again shoving their gavels up the election. Yes, the Supreme Court knows you can't just let states decide who goes on their ballots. States are too busy deciding that life begins in the freezer section next to the pearl onions. The majority says that disqualifying a candidate for insurrection can only occur when Congress passes legislation. Okay, quick question. If Congress does decide to pass that legislation to disqualify a candidate for insurrection, what if he sends his mob to storm Congress to stop them from passing that legislation? Does that count as insurrection? Or do they have to pass more legislation about that before the next mob shows up? This is what they were doing last night. Seth Meyers, same fucking bullshit. Jimmy Fallon, same fucking bullshit. Jon Stewart, same fucking bullshit. All the same fucking bullshit. Let that be a lesson to all you out there who might be thinking about subverting the Constitution as a presidential election. You go, boy. That's Jon Stewart. Funny, huh? Humorous. Of course, it had nothing to do with the reality of what was ruled. All Donald Trump did was make a claim, voice a concern that the vast majority of other nations around the world share. And that is, this electronic voting machines are too risky for their fragile democracies to use. They're better right now using paper, pencils, paper, pens, and plexiglass boxes. And they still do that to this day. And the vast majority of our allies across the world do that. They don't use electronic voting machines. And yet, according to the Supreme Court of Colorado, the court ruled Trump was involved in an insurrection by promoting false claims of election fraud. Were they false? Probably not. But we're never going to know because those machines have proprietary software. Because business interests outweigh the interest of the American people in having faith in their election system, faith in their elections. Donald Trump's not allowed to, according to Colorado, Donald Trump shouldn't be allowed to run for office because he brought into question the faith the American people will have on the election system. Not the fact that you can't go in there and check the actual fucking software, the code, to see how those machines count the election, count the votes. You can't do that. That's against the law. They'll practically shoot you in the fucking head if you tried. And you think that there's obviously not a problem with that? Let me continue with this. A number of cases have been brought against Trump supporters for daring to suggest the electronic voting machines can either be hacked or were designed to steal elections in the first place. And Trump was sued in a kangaroo court by Dominion Voting System for daring to suggest the same thing. Bloggers and writers were censored, including this one, when bringing up such issues. If they said anything other than the mere thought of electronic voting machines being rigged was a conspiracy theory. In the end, the Colorado Supreme Court has made it clear that Donald Trump was not allowed to play in their sandbox because he violated the unspoken rule by claiming the fix is in and we don't live in a true democracy anymore. This is an unforgivable sin and quite uncomfortable for the masters of the universe, who Trump himself served for many years as president. They liked his body of work while in office. He ushered in the, quote, China virus, unquote. He blamed it on the right people, the commies, let the Defense Threat Reduction Agency warp speed fake vaccines to the people, and still to this day sings their praises. Trump is a true Israel firster, and trickle-down tax deal breaks made them richer than ever while doing jack shit for the average working people. Trump let his generals bomb beloved leaders in other countries while he sat on his ass eating beautiful cake. Trump was a dream for them. His cronies privatized everything in government that wasn't nailed down while cutting regulations left and right. He made them money, and he gave them power in which they still made even more money. But they had to let him go. Hell, even the libertarians couldn't abide Trump's final sin. This is from Cato Institute, the Libertarian Cato Institute. Donald Trump's crusade to manufacture doubts about the outcome of the presidential election reached a new low on Thursday, when the president shifted from making vague, evidence-free assertions of massive and systemic vote fraud to promoting a specific and frankly bonkers conspiracy theory disseminated in all caps to the president's 89 million Twitter followers, alleging that software developed by Dominion Voting Systems had deleted 2.7 million Trump votes nationwide, and that 221,000 Pennsylvania votes had been switched from President Trump to Biden. That's the Libertarian Cato Institute. You see, it's bonkers to think electronic voting machines, which are not allowed to review the codes by which they count the votes, could possibly be rigged in any way. That's bonkers, right? Except most westernized nations don't use electronic voting machines just for that very reason. Hell, it seems pretty obvious when you think about it. But never let it said I don't offer solutions. And I did. I made a video. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but I made a video. You can click on the link right there if you'd like to see it. This ruling is being appealed by the U.S. to the U.S. Supreme Court, and for many of the reasons listed above, it will probably be overturned. But then again, you never know. Back in 2000, the U.S. Supreme Court got involved in our elections and stopped a recount so Bush and Cheney and all the neocon planners of 9/11 could take office when Florida election had clearly been stolen, but that's another story. You see, it's entirely possible they will uphold this ruling because Trump, running again, puts him in a very difficult position. Trump, say what you will about him, is a bit of a wild card in that they don't know what the hell he will do from one day to the next, and now he's pissed off. If Trump is allowed to run, and if our elections aren't rigged, short of some new candidate rising from the trash heap that is the Democratic Party of 2023, he will win, period, like it or not. And they can't let that happen. So, can they stand another round of exposure of their little democracy tricks so soon after the last one? Would they dare rig yet another election so obviously with their electronic voting machines and hope they can keep a lid on the backlash by censoring, suing, and arresting us into silence? I doubt it. So they are in a pickle as long as he runs, and the egotistical prick seems intent on doing it just out of spite, if nothing else. Perhaps the real Supreme Court will overturn this grandstanding ruling and we'll get to see what they come up with next to keep Orange Man out of office. Or perhaps they'll remember who they actually work for and let it stand. And perhaps this is all just a distraction to allow for Israel to kill another couple thousand children in Gaza unnoticed by the press. But what is important to take from all of this is the fact that the presidents and candidates can literally get away with mass murder and all sorts of heinous crimes against humanity, but what they can't be forgiven for is giving away big business's democracy trick. That is the only unforgivable sin in American politics. That is the only unforgivable sin in American politics. These fuckers are lying to you. The Colorado Supreme Court did not say Trump could not run because he ran an insurrection and sent his people down there to invade the fucking Capitol and stop the fucking democracy from happening. Clearly, what they said was, what the FBI said was, there was no fucking evidence that Trump had ever told anyone to go into the fucking Capitol and stop the fucking counting of the Electoral College votes. Ever. Didn't happen. What Trump did was worse than that. Trump called into question, Trump, a believable figure, a believable public figure, somebody who's a billionaire, by the way, and God knows what he really did was he was a class traitor. He was a class traitor. And the other billionaires were pissed off about it. They can't have a goddamn nation, our nation, run by the will of the people. Oh my God. Are you kidding me? They can't do it. They won't allow it. They won't allow for the people to vote the wrong way. And so their last fail-safe against that, electronic voting machines. That's their last fail-safe. That and or what the precursor to the libertarians did back in 1934, which was the business plot. Hire some fucking general someplace. In the case in 1934, they picked the wrong goddamn general, Smedley Butler, who turned them in and exposed what they were doing. But pick a fucking general, give them 500,000 fucking mercs, and take over the fucking country, and run it from the fucking boardrooms of Blackwater, State Street, Vanguard, Goldman Sachs, Citibank, and the various insurance companies that actually fucking dictate what this country does and what this country is going to become. That's it. As long as they want to maintain the illusion of democracy, of self-rule, of self-determination of a nation, which is, of course, the great experiment that Abraham Lincoln once spoke about and wrote about. As long as they want to maintain that illusion, they need electronic voting machines. Now, there are other nations that don't. They believe that they can debate back and forth, left versus right, or left versus right versus center versus something else, because they're parliamentary and they've got 900 fucking parties. But they believe they can debate back and forth, and the better ideas will win the day. And of course, the people will vote for those ideas and for those candidates voicing those ideas, and that's where their country will go. And we keep trying to give them the electronic voting machine, the democracy trick thing, but they keep saying, no, thank you. No, thank you. We don't need that. Appreciate it. We'll go with the great experiment that Abraham Lincoln once talked about. We'll go with that one. and we'll trust that we're able to find our best fucking way forward. Big business in America? Fuck that. Fuck that. Because again, I hate to keep going macro and macro and even more macro on you, but I'll do it again. Again, this is like the unipolar world order versus the multipolar world order. The unipolar world order says we're going to dictate from a boardroom someplace with these people that aren't elected by anybody what happens to the whole fucking world and what they have to do, and they can get rid of their goddamn borders, and they can take in all these fucking cheap laborers, and they can move them back and forth as flexible workforces, and you can allow George Soros to come in with hot money speculators, and you're going to take all your goddamn jabs. You're going to take all your goddamn... We don't even need a goddamn pandemic. We'll just take them. Or you can go with the multipolar world order, which says there are things like international law. We're not going to violate international law. You have the fucking right to run your country the way you and your people decide you run it, and your borders are sacrosanct. We're not going to violate them. And if you choose to sign up with us, then maybe we do business back and forth. It's mutually beneficial to all. That's the option. Now, which would you choose? Think about it real hard. Yeah, that's right. You'd choose the multipolar world order. But because our fucking business leaders and the masters of the universe are financially fucking dug in to the unipolar world order, they're going to jam it down people's fucking throats. They can't do that in the United States. The multipolar world order is a better mousetrap. And if you give the people the right to choose, they already have the right to choose. If you give them the ability to choose between a shitty mousetrap and a good mousetrap, they're going to go with a good mousetrap. By the same token, if you give them a shitty fucking agenda or a decent agenda, they're going to go with a decent agenda. But you can't do that. Not in America, because business fucking rules. Because the masters of the universe are stuffing the fucking shitty mousetrap down your fucking throat, and they're not giving you a choice. And in fact, once they get central bank digital currencies in place, they're just going to spend your money for you. They'll make your decisions for you. They have a plan, and they know that plan is not going to be popular. Ergo, Donald Trump cannot fucking talk about our electronic voting machines. Ever again. Now, all that said about the past and about what happened yesterday and what happened on December 19th and what I wrote on December 20th, all that said, where does that leave us now? These idiots on late night fucking influencer comedy news, what the fuck is it anyway? These jackasses all saying, oh my God, how dare the states not be allowed to determine who gets to be on their fucking ballots? How stupid, how short-sighted is that? How stupid is that? It makes them, listen to me, if you thought for 1 second, listening to someone like that last night and go, well, it kind of makes sense. How stupid is that? Because what's going to happen if they had that's why the 9 voted the way they did. Even the ones on the left voted the way they did. You would have chaos. As soon as the Supreme Court did that, they would find some fucking bullshit reason, just like Colorado did, they would find some fucking bullshit reason and kick fucking Joe Biden off the goddamn ballots in the red states. Wouldn't they? Damn right they would. Because according to the Supreme Court, if they had gone that way, and these jackasses on fucking late night television, any state should be able to just kick them off willy-nilly. Even though, if they're a blue state, if they're a red state, if they don't like them, just kick them the fuck off. Kick them the fuck off. Of course they weren't going to fucking do that. That would be chaos. That would be absolute chaos. That would be the end of democracy. What these guys were advocating for last night, anybody suggesting that this should have been allowed to stand, the Colorado Supreme Court decision should have been allowed to stand, with that logic, that trail of logic I just laid out for you, that would have been the end of fucking democracy as we know it. Because then every goddamn state, red or blue, would be kicking somebody off, and you wouldn't be able to hold a goddamn election. Period. Because, as I pointed out in my video, as an accompanying video with that article, there were other states ready to do the same thing Colorado did. They were blue states ready to kick Trump off, but I guarantee you, if the U.S. Supreme Court had ruled the other way, if it had been 9-0 the other way, I guarantee you, all the red states would have kicked Joe Biden off. And we would have had chaos. In the land of the great experiment, we would have degenerated to that, which would have been appalling and embarrassing. So, where does this leave us now? Well, we've talked about this before. This wasn't going to be the solution. Maybe the solution is Donald Trump will easily fucking beat Joe Biden. And there's no fucking way. They might be able to say there's a third party, the no brands, what do they call them? No labels fucking party or some stupid shit. Maybe they've pulled enough votes from Donald Trump. Maybe they can create a narrative that creates some kind of way to get Joe Biden over the fucking finish line and win. And we're supposed to just swallow it and believe it. Maybe that's one option. Another option is, the evil Chinese, for some reason, no one knows why, but the evil Chinese decide that they're going to attack us with electronics and virus things, and they stop the election because our election system shuts down, and our grid shuts down, and our bank shuts down, and the social safety net shuts down because the evil Chinese did it. And so that way they have to say there can't be an election right now because there's a crisis. And so, of course, that's one way to fix the problem, keep Donald Trump out of office. The other way, of course, is along comes Disease X. And Disease X, as opposed to SARS-CoV-2, also made in a lab, probably the same goddamn lab by the same fucking people. Disease X is actually extremely fucking dangerous and shuts down a lot of shit. And of course, they get to put the jabs in you, and then they get to mandate the jabs because Disease X is actually something that actually does kill a lot of fucking folks. Maybe that's a possibility. Who knows? Either way, it's not going to be the Supreme Court ruling that Donald Trump cannot participate. That was doomed from the beginning. And even this lefty, even this Marxist, even this commie could see that coming less than fucking 12 hours after the fucking Colorado Supreme Court ruling was publicized. As everybody should have seen it coming. But again, the takeaway here is not that the U.S. Supreme Court did not uphold the Colorado Supreme Court's decision. It isn't even the numbers. It isn't even, the makeup. How many Democrats versus how many Republicans voted that this was a bad idea? A lot. The takeaway is not any of that. The takeaway is why. Why? Why did the Colorado Supreme Court do it? Why did they do it in the first place? Because remember, they picked Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And then they tweaked the fucking numbers in the primary, and they won the primary. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. You talk about some milquetoast shit that nobody would get behind. Really? That's what they came up with to go against fucking Donald Trump, the seated president in 2020? It's almost as if they wanted Donald Trump to win. until election night, and he started ranting about fucking electronic voting machines. And then all of a sudden, go back and look at it. I'm telling you. We'll see how it goes from here. I'm glad they ruled the way they did. There was really no other way when you think about it, because of what would have happened. It would have been fucking absolute chaos. It might be more chaos now because of it. Who the fuck knows? But maybe they'll find some other law, some other fucking attorney general or some other prosecutor. But they should keep an eye on the prosecutors they try to use to come up with ways to keep them off the ballots, because they keep getting fucking found out for being corrupt motherfuckers. Anyway, I gotta go. I just thought I'd share that with you. That's not the reason. That's not the reason. It was nothing about sending people into an insurrection. It was about what he said about electronic voting machines, that the Colorado Supreme Court did what they did. And those people who say that this is the death of democracy, or this could risk democracy, all those motherfuckers, including the ones I showed you on late night television last night, suggesting that the Supreme Court should have upheld this, what they were calling for would have actually been the end of the great experiment. That's a fact. And I'll talk to you later. Take care. Bye-bye.